Welcome to ETAuto Insight live panel discussion. We all get disturbed when we see old vehicles enveloping the streets under the cloud of carbon dioxide and making it tough to breathe. Vehicle manufacturers have been demanding a government-funded replacement policy. Countries like USA, Germany, Italy, France, and UK already has adopted such measures during the downturns at different times. But in these countries, the stimulus received mixed responses. The policy is also expected to stimulate the beleaguered Indian auto industry and bring a spurt in sales. In a presentation made to the Parliamentary Standing Committee, headed by Janata Dal United MP KC Tyagi, Society of Indian Automobiles Manufacturers recommended that customers should receive concession of up to Rs. 1 lakh in taxes if they sell vehicles older than 15 years, with cutoff date 1996. Society of Indian Automobiles Manufacturers this proposal attracted opposition from Road Transport and Highways Ministry, which recommended that fitness test result should be the basis of phase out and not the age. So let's find out what are the implications and possibilities in implementing such a policy with our expert panel members, Mr. Nitin R. Gokarn, Senior Bureaucrat and CEO, NATRIP, Captain N.S. Mohan Ram, Chairman, Recycling Subgroup, Society of Indian Automobiles Manufacturers, Mr. Vishnu Mathur, Director General, Society of Indian Automobiles Manufacturers, Mr. Abdul Majid, Partner, Automotive Practices, Price Waterhouse, and I'm Nabil Khan, your host. This is an open panel discussion. I, along with Mr. Abdul Majid, moderate the discussion. I would first like to invite Mr. Captain Mohan Ram, who has been working on this subject for over 20 years, to briefly give an overview of the situation. Mr. Captain Mohan Ram.
Good morning. I think we should at first look at the magnitude of the problem. A study done by A.T. Kearney indicated the number of vehicles coming for recycling between 2010 to 2020 will triple. It will go from 3 million to 9 millions. 80% of them being two-wheelers, remainder passenger vehicles, three-wheelers, and commercial vehicles. This is a huge volume. This is an accumulation which is allowed to continue, resulting in a major problem. The whole idea of one-time stimulus, one-time incentive, is to clear the system initially and get it going. Even in countries with very well-established systems like Germany, such incentives are necessary because people are often held back by lethargy, by inertia, and sometimes lack of information. In Germany, for instance, in 2009, when the scheme was announced, the number of vehicles retired went up from 0.4 to 0.5 million a year to 1.8 million a year. United States, with typical American penchant for crude language, called it cash for clunkers, they got rid of 690,000 vehicles. Actually, it doesn't benefit the auto industry too much because it only just prepones purchases. The real gainer is the environment, because old, polluting, unsafe vehicles are off the roads and the new vehicles come in. Studies indicate actual benefits to the auto industry in terms of additional sales is not significant. What is significant is additional revenue in terms of advanced receipts to the government. More importantly, reduction in emissions to the public. I'd like to throw it open to the others to comment on this now, please.
Yeah, my first question would go to Mr. Mathur. SIAM has proposed a 15 years of age for vehicles. So is it going to be common for entire segment, or what is the idea? How it could be the same date line, same kind of aging, criteria for entire segment, commercial vehicle, passenger vehicle, and two-wheeler?
Mr. Khan, just to add a perspective to what Captain Mohan Ram just mentioned, I think if we look at, he mentioned about the imperatives of environment. I think there are three clear imperatives that drives us to look at something like a fleet modernization policy. The first is certainly the environment. Indian cities and India as a whole is reputed to have one of the worst ambient air qualities in the world. The second is the issue of safety. I think we also have a reputation of being a highly unsafe country in terms of our road accidents, etc. And the third is the imperative of energy conservation. Now, if you look at all these three factors, a one-time fleet modernization policy becomes an imperative for our country, which doesn't hurt anybody else in the world. It's an internal initiative that we'll take here. Basically, what happens is that while the emission norms have improved over the last 10-15 years, the tendency of the Indian consumer is to continue using the vehicle far, far beyond its expected age. Now, what happens is that the vehicles which are still running on the Indian roads and entering into the cities, which today have BS4 emission norms, are still vehicles which may not be following any emission norms at all because they were manufactured way back before the emission norms were implemented in the country. So that is the kind of situation we have today. Similarly, these old vehicles, probably not even well-maintained vehicles, have frequent brake failures and other problems on the road leading to accidents on the highway as well as in the city. So that is what is really happening. Now, what we had proposed is two different age limits for commercial vehicles and private vehicles, mainly from the perspective that we expect that the privately owned vehicles will be better maintained than commercial vehicles. Also, in terms of usage, a commercial vehicle will probably do about 1 lakh of kilometers in a year, while a privately owned vehicle will do about 15 to 20,000 kilometers in a year maximum.
So, sir, you have said that the age limit has been set by you, but do you have any kind of order that which segment should be first phased out, CV, cars, SUV, or two-wheeler? And second question, so you are saying that age limit, but sometimes it happens that the vehicles are well kept, and even in 10 years, 15 years, it doesn't, go that bad if you talk about emission and all. So in that case, don't you think that Road and Transport Ministry's comment that it should be the test of the vehicle and health of the vehicle that should be criteria? What is your view on this?
Definitely the INC mechanism, which is the inspection and certification mechanism, is the ultimate. A robust INC mechanism is ultimately the answer to most of these issues. What we are saying is that in 15 years, if a vehicle, a truck for example, is doing 1 lakh kilometers in a year, it has already done about 15 lakh kilometers. Now beyond that, it is impossible to keep the vehicle in good shape. So while during those 15 years, the INC mechanism will have to operate and provide a roadworthiness certificate to the vehicle to come on the road every year. After an age of, let's say, 15 years or something like that, the vehicle should definitely be asked to go off, especially if it is not meeting any emission norm today. Now, even if the vehicle is being very, very well maintained, it is still not meeting an emission norm because it was manufactured at a time when there were no emission norms.
Okay.
So what we are talking about here, the INC system is a continuous process which will run continuously over a period of time. What we are talking about here is a one-time initiative to remove those old vehicles which don't meet the safety norms, which don't meet the emission norms from the Indian roads, and therefore have an immediate impact on ambient air quality as well as safety.
Yes, now I'd like to go to Mr. Gokran. Sir, you have been into government, road and transport ministry also. Now you are CEO of NATRIP. You have seen the industry quite closely. What are the rules and regulations need to be prepared at central and state level to implement such policy?
Well, as Mr. Mathur just mentioned, it's a combination of 3 or 4 things. One is to have a robust I&M mechanism, which is presently lacking in the country. If you look at the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways in the last 5-year plan, there was a plan to put up 10 inspection and certification centers across the country. But 10 centers will not suffice for the magnitude of the problem. Just looking at the throughput in terms of the number of vehicles that ply on the Indian roads, the order in about 2010 that was calculated was about 1,000 of such I&C centers across the country. Now, government won't be able to fund all these, so definitely there has to be private sector participation, their capital infused into it, and private sector will put in their money only if they feel that there is a return towards it. So in terms of a policy, what is the mechanism is probably threefold. One is to have a legislation that all vehicles should have an annual fitness regime, as you find vehicles abroad. Because unless your vehicle is fit to ply on the road, it should not be allowed to ply on the road in the first place, whether it's a commercial vehicle or a private vehicle. And compounded to it is certain criteria in terms of what constitutes the fitness, whether it has the safety mechanisms, whether it has got the emission norms. Because the PUC mechanism today, as most observers agree, is not robust enough to cater to the entire emission regulations, and therefore this I&M measures should also not go the way of the current POC system. The third
now
is
I'd like to invite Mr. Abdul Majid to make his observation on this subject. Mr. Abdul Majid. Yeah, I think Mr. Abdul Majid is not able to connect. So my next question would be, where will the infrastructure
I tend to agree with the
for
panelist.
scrapping
Basically, there are two things here, Nabil. One.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Abdul Majid is joining in now. Mr. Majid.
You able to hear me?
Yeah, Mr. Abdul Majid. Yeah.
Will you able to hear me?
Yeah.
I think I tend to agree with the panelist. There are two views here, Nabil. One, basically, how can you clear the new old system, the old backlog, and then you can have a, going forward what we need to do. I think there are two aspects to it. So I tend to agree that I think the government of India, I think the various regulators need to think about this problem, which is going to become already serious in my view.
Seems we have lost contact with Mr. Abdul Majid. Now I would like to ask Mr. Gokran, sir, where will the infrastructure for scrapping vehicle be set up? Will it be across selected cities or across India? What is the idea?
Well, the idea is definitely that it will be the private sector which will do the setting up of the scrappage units. Now, there was a particular pilot project which has been executed by NATRIP to understand what kind of end-of-life regulations are needed to have finally environmentally friendly methods of disposals. With the help of the industry, two-wheelers and four-wheelers, they have been scrapped, and what is the final value of the product and how do you actually dispose of the wastage has been looked at. Now the issue is we need to scale it up, we need to involve the private sector, the existing players in the private sector who are quite efficient as far as the disposal is concerned, but may not be so in an environmentally friendly way, to get into this entire act and business of ELV, what is called as the end of life regulations for vehicles.
So I'll head towards Mr. Mathur. Sir, what will happen to the pre-owned car industry? How is it going to impact that industry if we bring such policy into force?
So I think as far as pre-owned cars are concerned, definitely when a car or a vehicle of any kind comes up for scrapping, most likely it will not be with the first owner. It will either be with the second owner or the third owner. In case of commercial vehicles, it may be with the sixth or the seventh owner. So I think the kind of scheme that we need to work out, we need to look at this aspect very closely, and to see that the incentive that is given at the time of scrapping of the car or the vehicle actually flows back to the initial owners for them to be able to get the incentive. What we had proposed is an incentive of a lower concessional excise duty. And I think if we can design some kind of a script which can be tradable, If the slip is given to a person who is the sixth or the seventh owner of the vehicle, he can pass it down as a tradable slip to anybody who wants to buy a new vehicle. And then the whole thing can be done in that manner. So that's an aspect that needs to be looked at in great depth and detail. But it is something that can be worked out. It is not unworkable.
Okay, what about the inventory at the dealership level? Suppose a car is manufactured in December. So the owner would not like to buy in January. So what will happen for these kind of period? Should the registration date be criteria or the mandate of manufacturing? What is the idea?
I think the simple way to do it is the registration. Because even today, if you look at the rules and regulations under the CMVR, there is an age limit fixed for giving national permit for vehicles. For example, for a multi-axle vehicle, the age limit is 15 years. For other non-multi-axle vehicles, it is 12 years. It is all done from the date of registration. So I think that would be the simple thing to do.
Okay. My next question would be from Mr. Gokran. What will be will the agency do with scrap generator? Will it be recycled, or how can we work on this? I'd like to get answer from both Mr. Gokran as well as Mr. Mohan Rao.
Well, there are certain parts of it which get very easily recycled. There are players in the industry today, in government and in the private sector, which have evinced interest, including the catalytic converters, including the steel and other parts, for which the value has also been computed. In fact, there's an interesting study done by the GR Center of Chennai under MATRIP, which has worked out each of the components and what the general pricing of the scrap for a car or for a two-wheeler could be looking like. The question is of scalability in terms of the numbers and how you do the distribution channel in terms of getting the old cars or the old two-wheelers on board in order to scrap it. And then creating a market, as Mr. Mathur correctly mentioned, in terms of a tradable value for whatever is the value of the car. If that is known upfront, I'm sure quite a few people may be interested to sell their vehicles to such entities.
Vishnu sir, my next question is to you. How far will the economic stimulus from such an initiative spread? Will it help in creating new jobs in the industry?
I think one thing I need to be very clear about in terms of perception is that this scheme that SIAM has suggested is nothing to do with the current slowdown. We have not proposed this scheme as a part of a stimulus package. It is a recommendation that has been made by SIAM over the years, and not just by SIAM. If you look at the auto mission plan that was set up in 2003, that also talks about fleet modernization. The recent Supreme Court cases which are going on in terms of the EPCA and the environment also talks about purging away the old polluting vehicles from the Indian roads. So we would not like it to be, it is not a part of stimulus. It is not, we are not asking for this scheme just because the industry takes a rough patch. We have been asking for this scheme for the last 6-7 years, even when the industry was doing very well. We had been requesting this kind of a scheme basically from the point of view of the other three factors that I mentioned and what Mr. Gokran also reinforced.
So, will the program threaten future sales? That is, assuming people buy more cars now, that in a few months' time will be hit with the low sales again. Don't you think so?
I think if there is some kind of one-time purging done, after that, a vehicle will be scrapped largely based on the INC mechanism. So the INC mechanism, as Mr. Gokran mentioned today, is not very robust. But as we go along, we will be setting up more and more INC centers, and there will be a much better and a stronger INC regime which will be enforced. So just like in any other country, scrappage will then be decided through the INC route. What we are talking about is a one-time purging of the old vehicles, which will have an impact on safety, environment, as well as energy conservation.
Gokran sir, what are the challenges in implementing such a policy when we see lots of government agencies are involved in it, like registration, RTOs, and all? How will they react to such policy? What are the expectations at that front?
See, the scheme in the federal structure of our country is such that under the central motor vehicle rules, the general rules are formulated by the Minister of Road Transport and Highways. But the actual execution and implementation, as you are aware, are done by the various state governments through their transport departments and in the field through the various RPs. Now we have vehicle registration database which is there across the country, the Vahan database today, wherein we know quite clearly as to what the vehicles are and what their rate profiles are looking like. So if all the agencies get together on a common platform and an understanding, the implementation should not be too much of a problem.
Okay, now I think we have Mr. Abdul Majid here with us. I would like to have his point of view. Mr. Abdul Majid. I'll go back to Mr. N.S. Mohan Ram. So, as an OEM, if we see what are the challenges and what are the opportunity if we have such kind of policy in place, looking at the Indian situation right now?
I'd like to clarify that I look at the issue as someone interested in automotive recycling and environment rather than as an OEM representative. The OEM viewpoint will better be expressed by the DG SIAM. So there's a lot of talk of inspection and maintenance. Now the whole system is like a human being who's constipated. This idea of one time is a purgative. The purgative cleans out the system. It can't be a daily medicine. After that, you have to go to a healthy regime, healthy diet, etc. So I would suggest the analogy is very appropriate. Once you give a purgative, a lot of toxins get out of the system, get flushed out. And then you start applying exercise, diet, etc. Man who's suffering from acute constipation, you can't tell him to go on exercise and diet. Doesn't work. Now these systems are one-off systems administered once in a few years. Now even in countries like Germany, where a well-established recall system, they had to resort to this because people are lethargic. I think India is in a real crossroads. We've been producing vehicles madly for the last 20 years without a single thought about their disposal. It's like a community which has a lot of midwives and no undertakers. I'm looking at it purely from the recycling point of view. And secondly, with all the will in the world, it's not going to be easy to produce more people come forward dismantling and for shredding. There's not a single shredder in India today. The only shredder is being thought about by MSTC in Gujarat next year. Nathaniel brought a shredder in 1978 and took it to Dubai because there is no market here. The whole recycling is done by informal agencies. So it's a very difficult situation. If we wait for inspection and certification centers to come up, the situation will get so bad, nothing can be done. I am not advocating one-time disposal of old vehicles to help the auto industry. The auto industry is subject to booms and slowdowns. It may be going through it, it will get out of it, as correctly pointed out by Vishnu Mathur. This was presented when the auto industry was going through a boom. It is mentioned in the 2003 auto policy itself. Basically, if you do nothing about it, we are going to get into a very serious situation. And the vehicles we want to retire were all built before 1996. There has been a sea change in emission regulation. Every vehicle is replaced. There is a motorcycle, commercial vehicle, three-wheeler, or a truck, or a bus. It's going to make environment much easier. And legislation alone is not going to work. So a little bit of incentive. And as pointed out in the SIAM presentation to the Parliamentary Committee, net there is no financial loss. There will be only a financial gain. And the intangible benefits to society in terms of emissions, something which is never calculated. And I think something we have to find a monetary value for that to make people understand. So let me repeat again. We are in a situation like a patient with acute constipation. Let us not talk about diet, exercise, and the healthy style of living. Let us first attack the immediate malady. Let us give him a purgative. Milk of magnesia, or castor oil, or whatever you call it. I think that is what is needed in the system now.
Now I'd like to go back to again Mr. Nitin Gokaran. Mr. Mohan Ram has just talked about finance, that there won't be any financial loss to anybody. What are the likely financial implications of this scheme? While it entails a discount on taxes for people scrapping old vehicles, there is another fact that this loss to the exchequer will be more than offset by buyers who would have otherwise not bought new vehicles. The finance ministry will have to sign off on it. What is the idea? What is your response to it?
So there are two aspects to it. One is the central duties, excise, etc., and the other is the state taxes, sales tax, etc. So it has to be examined by the state concerned as well as the center. So it's a little complicated as far as the benefit versus the costs are concerned to the states. That said, on a net basis, whatever proposal SIAM has given, it appears that there is more benefit by way of increasing revenues rather than the outflow by way of incentives. But it needs further detailed examination.
So I'd like to go back to Mr. Mohan Ram. How will this policy help the transport and fleet owners?
In fact, transport and fleet owners' vehicles run a lot more. Typically, I've checked up in Madras. These intercity private vehicles which run on this, matadors and things like that, they're typically scrapped in 10 years anyway. Nobody buys them because they're completely rugged out by the time the 10 years are over. And let me put it this way, that people are scrapping vehicles earlier than before. You don't see any 15-year-old motorcycles on the road, hardly any. There may be the odd enthusiast who may be keeping the vehicle well maintained. I think this 1996 cutoff makes abundant sense, because whatever done before 1996 were built according to the rules prevalent at that time. They had no emission, no significant safety regulations. What we are suggesting is flush the toxin out of the system, and every vehicle which is replaced, even with excise duty concession, will give net additional excise duty to government and relieve the immediate financial burden. Overall, I think this system works. This cannot be a repetitive system. It's like what the finance ministry did for income tax collection. They gave relief for people, say, once in 5 or 10 years. That they can't do it regularly. This is a thing which has been done even in advanced countries with well-established systems of collection, recycling, and dismantling. Now, in India, the major issue, I think, is if a large number of vehicles come in, people will come in and set up units. Already I'm being approached by some people from Gujarat mainly, who want to set up dismantling recycling centers. I've asked them to visit the unit at Chennai, with which I am closely involved, and made suggestions to them how to make it viable. I think SIAM's proposal of considering a bigger city can be even broken up into further smaller things, maybe 2-3 big cities. And one thing we have to ensure that when anybody scraps a vehicle, there should be positive proof that the vehicle is scrapped. There should be a destruction certificate. There should be a means of establishing that the guy does not claim the funds and quietly pass it on to somebody who repairs and uses the vehicle again. This is an administrative issue which has to be tackled. This is something which is not easy, because right now we don't have a formal destruction certificate system prevalent throughout the country.
Sir, I just hope Mr. Abdul Majid can hear me. Abdul Majid, can you hear me?
I'm able to hear you.
Yeah, I would like to take your point of view on this subject. Do you think it is workable in India? How fruitful it is going to be? Because the kind of corpus that has been announced by the government, how do you see it, the entire things?
No, I think, as I said, basically we have to get first. I think the magnitude of issue on our table is very big. I think that is there in terms of now whether you need to start somewhere down the line. So for that purpose, I think I do tend to agree that more than automotive industry, I think this is going to benefit the public at large. From the I think if the corpus is not available, in terms of, I think, what is at the beginning we can do just to make sure that with next 2 or 3 years down the 2 or 3 years, we can get rid of all the vehicles which are not feasible to the environment, which are not roadworthy. I think that is most important. Then how you intend to do that, and what sort of policy framework you need to have to get to know that, okay, fine, these funds are used properly. I think that is one big issue we need to tackle on the table. But this is something which is very serious. I think we need to just make that start somewhere. And I know that we'll be having a lot of challenges in between, but we need to overcome. And once the problem has been put to the rest, then going forward, you need to have a proper policy. Otherwise, I think we as a country are going to be in deep trouble.
Okay. I would like to go to Mr. Mathur once again. How long will the scheme be in place? Or will there be a flexibility to change the age of vehicle being scrapped in future? For example, from the present possibility of 15 years being reduced to 10 years or 8 years in future? Any such proposition that you guys are proposing?
See, what we had suggested was we are talking about a one-time incentive scheme to purge old vehicles from the Indian roads. As we go along over the long term, the answer is going to be lying in a robust, strong inspection and maintenance regime. So once the inspection and maintenance regime sets in, then it is the roadworthiness certificate which will determine whether the vehicle should be continued on the roads or will it be scrapped. That decision will have to be taken by the owner. So there is no question about reducing gradually the age of vehicles as we go along. We are not talking here about a mandatory policy to set the age. We are talking here about an incentive scheme, an incentive to be given to the owner of the vehicle to get the vehicle scrapped if it is more than a certain age. That is what we are talking about here.
So finally, when it comes into force, if it comes, I would like to seek both Nitin Gokran and Vishnu Mathur's opinion. Is it going to be the age of the vehicle that is going to define, or the fitness test, or it is going to be a combination of both? What we are going to have in India, and how soon we can have such a policy in place in India?
See, as far as the industry is concerned, our suggestion is that we have identified vehicles which are commercial vehicles which are over 15 years of age, and private vehicles, commercial vehicles of 10 years of age and private vehicles over 15 years of age. We have come to a figure of about 27 million such vehicles, which include commercial vehicles, cars, as well as two-wheelers. Now, if those vehicles can be taken off the roads at this point of time, after that, whatever new crop of vehicles come will be scrapped through the INC mechanism. So that is what the whole system is about. It is not going to be a combination. What we are talking about is a one-time effort to keep off the Indian vehicles of the Indian road, which are old. And after that, the INC regime will determine whether the car or the vehicle will continue to run on the road or not.
Now, Gokran sir, what is your point of view?
Well, the issue is twofold. As one is an immediate requirement to look at the very old vehicles that are still plying on our roads, whether they are fit or not, whether they are on the emission norms or not, and the kind of emission norms that need to be put into place pertaining to these vehicles. That is one issue where the entire industry is facing the fact that you have about 27 million of such vehicles which can immediately be taken under a scheme. And also going forward, what is the mechanism to ensure that these vehicles don't find their way back onto the road because of recycling of several of these parts or recycling of these vehicles made by not destroying it physically. So, as Captain Mandram also mentioned, a destruction certificate to ensure that these are physically destroyed and not just recycled and for the taking of the incentive. That mechanism also has to be put into place. Removing it from the RC book, removing it from the registration system itself completely is an administrative issue that also needs to be tackled. Going forward, it will be a combination of an immediate requirement for taking these vehicles under the scheme and an INC regime. But also, the producers will have to work alongside the government as far as the industrialized mechanisms are concerned. a lot of players will have to have defined roles. The government, the state government, the center, the producers, the end-of-life players, the scrap dealers, all of them will have specific roles, and there, how do you dovetail their requirements into the scheme will be the entire challenge for the scheme going forward.
Abdul, now I'd like to invite you to give a perspective if this policy goes into place, and how soon should it be implemented in India, looking at the current situation. What is your view? How is it going to change the current automotive industry? Abdul Majid. So I'll direct the same question to Mr. Mathur. How do you see this impacting? What do we see that the industry, the sales will start moving into now north direction? Will have a better year, FY 14-15. If we have this, do you think that this will be implemented in this financial year?
This is not something, as I said earlier, which is being looked at by the industry as a stimulus package. It is not a stimulus package. It is different than the cash for clunkers that was done in other countries, because that was largely to give a stimulus to the industry. This is mainly to look at environment, safety, and fuel consumption. Of course, it will also give some immediate benefit to the industry as and when the scheme comes. It is going to be a difficult scheme to implement. There are lots of issues to be looked at. There are a lot of complications that have to be addressed. So I don't expect the scheme to be made applicable in the next 2 or 3 or 5 months. There will be a lot of detailing to be done in the scheme. And when the scheme comes, at that point of time, you will see, definitely we will see an upturn in the industry, but that will be a short-term adjustment of stock, because some vehicles will go out and some vehicles will come in. In the long and medium term, the demand for the industry will stabilize.
Now, one more question from Mr. Gokran, then we will wind up. Sir, do you think India at this point of time really needs such a stimulus package, Indian automotive industry?
Well, let's not look at it as a stimulus package to the auto sector. Look at it from the point of view of road safety, where you have 1.5 lakh people dying on the road. Quite a few of it because the vehicles are not safe. Look at it from the point of view of the fuel efficiency system, because quite a few of these old vehicles are not fuel efficient, and the subsidy that is coming on to the general fuel by the country, because most of our fuel comes from abroad. Look at it from the point of emissions, because quite a few of these are flying on our roads and not complying with the emission standards. So looking at it purely from a one-time demand from the industry may not be the exact answer. I must look at it from probably a broader public policy.
It has been a really insightful discussion. Now, I would see if Abdul Majid can give his perspective on how it is going to impact the industry, if this, how the market dynamics is going to change. Abdul Majid, if you can give a perspective on this issue. Abdul, can you hear me? Yeah, I think we have lost connection with Mr. Majid. I would like to thank entire panelists for their insightful discussion. We'll again be back with another topic on ETAuto Insight. We'll leave you with some of the comments which has come from our readers to share. Thank you so much for tuning to ETAuto.com.